There are 14 students enrolled in a Jujutsu high school in Jujutsu Kaisen, and today we are going to rank all of them. For this video, I will only be focusing on the students' progress through the Shibuya arc. I've chosen this as the stopping point for two reasons. First of all, with the Culling Wars still progressing, I did not want to make commentary on a developing story, as it could change the ranking of the video as I'm making the video. And second, I haven't read it yet. Listen, I have a full-time job and adult responsibilities. I'll read it as soon as I can, but I just haven't gotten to it yet. This is the criteria I use. Now let's get into it. The weakest student in a Jujutsu high school through Shibuya is undoubtedly Errata. Errata's role is entirely support-based, and as such he is completely non-combatant. While his healing ability is quite useful, it's not a good indicator of whether or not he's a strong sorcerer. On top of this, he is also the only student that we never see in a fight, and we also see very little of him in general. As such, I thought it was only fitting to put him at last. Next up, we have Miwa. Look, I love Miwa. I love her as much as she loves Gojo. Well, maybe not quite that much. But I don't think it takes a genius to understand why I'm ranking her so low. She only has one fight in the show and it doesn't exactly go well for her. Obviously, in this fight, she's up against Maki, who is a much better sorcerer than her, but I honestly doubt she could beat anyone else on this list. I think the root of her issues is that she doesn't have much confidence. She has very little confidence in her actions and her abilities. On top of that, we haven't really seen a curse technique from her. She utilizes a simple domain, allowing her to act 100% off of her reflexes. But this isn't a huge benefit for her, as her reflexes are not that great. I think it's also worth mentioning that a simple domain is also known as the domain for the weak. So take that how you will. Personally, I do think weak is the only word that can describe Miwa. I really wish it wasn't that way, but I call it how I see it. Next we have Momo. Momo is in a unique position. Much like Errata, she doesn't seem to be that combat oriented. Her abilities are more aimed at reconnaissance, which is part of why I am rating her so low. Don't get me wrong, recon is an important part of Jujutsu, but it's not a good indicator of strength. She does have some offensive capabilities with her broom, as she can command it on its own and create a gust of wind with it. But even these are not that strong, as Nabara was able to brush them both off without much issue as a relatively new first year. Between this and the lack of evidence that she might be stronger, I can't really put her higher than 12th. Before we go any further, please consider subscribing. I know sub-shilling is lame, but at my size, subscribers really help me out. Over 90% of my viewers are not subscribed, and I would really appreciate if we could get that number a bit lower. It's just one click, and you can unsubscribe later if you really want to. Anyway, coming in at 11, we have Mai. You know, now that I'm making this video, I kind of see why the Kyoto school got clapped in the exchange event. Anyway, Mai is a combat-oriented sorcerer, but she doesn't really do that well in combat. Like, she literally brings a gun to a knife fight and still loses. Her creation curse technique seems interesting but also limiting, especially when you consider the amount of cursed energy needed to create even a small bullet. Her technique is also much less useful if someone knows how it works, as her advantage lies in surprising her opponents with an additional bullet. But I think the main issue with her is her lack of motivation. It's clear that she did not want to become a Jujutsu sorcerer in the first place, and I think it's affecting her work ethic and drive. As a result, she's not reaching her full potential, but it kind of seems like her full potential isn't even that high. I really feel like the easiest way to describe her is wasted potential, and it is self-inflicted wasted potential. Rounding out the top 10, we have Inumaki. Inumaki has a really interesting curse technique with cursed speech, and he puts this technique to great use. He's phenomenal at recon and phenomenal at support, but he can still hold his own in combat as well. The main issue for him is that cursed speech is one of the few cursed techniques that has a definite end due to throttle damage. On top of this, he also does not get a ton of screen time even with Jujutsu Kaisen 0. This makes it hard to get an accurate read on his abilities compared to higher rankers. To be honest, I had a hard time choosing between Panda and Inumaki for 10th, but in the end I decided to go with Inumaki purely because he was the only Tokyo student not recommended for promotion after the Tokyo event. This puts him below Panda as a sorcerer, which is why he's below Panda on this list. As already mentioned, Panda is our person at 9th. Well, our Panda at 9th. I think Panda could potentially be much higher up, but we only get to see his fight against Mechanmaru. During this fight, he lost not one, but two of his cores. The fact that Panda struggled so much against an opponent like a regular Mechanmaru is the main reason that he's down here. He has a lot of potential being a cursed womb and having 3 cores, but it just doesn't seem like he's using his cores as well as he could. Like most of the people in this lower half, I feel like Panda is just not quite meeting his potential, or he's not using his abilities as well as he could be. However, that ends with our next person. Coming in at number 8, we have Nobara. Nobara has one of the most versatile curse techniques in the show. It allows her to inhibit cursed energy and reflect damage back at a host with Straw Doll and Resonance. This results in her being able to fight on her own and in a group setting very well. She was instrumental in defeating Mahito in Shibuya before she, and she was also key in defeating 2 cursed paintings. So with all this going for her, why is she so low? Well, from here on out, the competition gets very stiff. Everyone from here on out will either have more experience or less drawbacks with their techniques. It's not that she's a bad user like some of the lower ranked sorcerers, it's more because the next few are just so much stronger. Next up, we have Camo. Camo is here for 2 reasons. First of all, blood manipulation is a crazy good ability. It's extremely versatile and we can see Camo use it in a number of ways. From blood-tipped arrows to supersonic blood to creating binds with blood, he uses blood manipulation extremely well for someone with a limited amount of blood. This brings me to my second reason that he's here. He has a limited amount of blood. Obviously, Camo has figured out a workaround to this via his blood bags, but even then he needs to keep the management of his blood on his mind while using his abilities. On top of this, there's also a definitive end to when he can use his ability. As we mentioned with Inumaki, this is a major drawback, especially in longer battles. Between the pros and cons of blood manipulation and Camo's knowledge of Jujutsu, I thought 7 would be the best ranking for him. Coming in at number 6, we have Mechanmaru. Mechanmaru is another person that's extremely hard to rank. On one hand, he lost to Panda in his main form, but on the other hand, he also has ultimate mode, which is one of the best abilities of any of the students. The way that I approached ranking Mechanmaru was basically averaging his 2 forms. I think Mechanmaru is one of the few students that reach their full potential in Jujutsu Kaisen. His ultimate form is a great utilization of his saved time, and on its own, it might put Mechanmaru at the top 3, but we already know it's not sustainable for him as it takes years of his life to maintain the form. This is a huge drawback, and I think it limits how well the ultimate form could work in different situations. Coming in at number 5, we have Yuji. I can see arguments being made that Mechanmaru should be above Yuji, and I can respect that, but I would disagree. Yuji has a lot of different things going for him. He has superhuman strength and agility without any cursed energy. On top of this, he's an expert in martial arts, which complements his agility and strength very well. On top of this, he's also a fairly fast learner, as he was able to catch up with Nabara and Megumi in a limited amount of time. And on top of that, he also has protection from Sukuna, which prevents damage from his soul and ensures protection from poison. He's able to go toe-to-toe with special grade curses just months after learning Jujutsu exists in the first place. He was able to defeat Mahito after an extremely long battle. He fended off the majority of the Kyoto school for a little bit and even kept up with Toto before they became friends. He probably has the most feats out of every student in the show, but I don't think feats alone are a good indicator of strength. I think the ability to collaborate and the ability to be versatile are both extremely important to indicating strength, and Yuji does both of these very well. We've seen him fight alongside Nobara and Todo, and he's great at letting them excel while shining when he needs to as well. Yuji reminds me of the saying jack of all trades, master of none, because he doesn't excel in one situation. He's good at everything, but there's someone who's almost always better than him in one aspect or another. This is why I've determined to place him at 5th. At 4th, we have Maki. Maki is, well, Maki. She's one of the best, if not the best, cursed weapon user in the show. While she does have a heavenly restriction, she makes great use of its benefits to the point that it doesn't even seem like she's restricted. She's among the fastest people in the show, and she uses this speed to her advantage. She went toe-to-toe with Hanami and was instrumental in their defeat, although she did not do that well against Dagon. It should not be any surprise to see Maki this high up, as she consistently performed well throughout the entire show. Rounding out the top 3, we have the final member of the main trio, Megumi. Megumi has the most Jujutsu experience out of the main trio, and he also has one of the best abilities in the show. The 10 Shadows technique gives Megumi control of 10 different Shikigami. They're all unique and they all give Megumi a large range of tools to fight with. He uses them in intended ways and unintended ways, as seen in Shibuya. He can also summon cursed weapons on command, allowing for strong collaboration and allowing him to fight in close quarters, which is rare for a Shikigami user. He has also developed his own domain expansion, which is rare rare for someone of his age. On top of all this, he also has a trump card in Mahoraga. While he cannot control this entity, he can use it when he's on the brink of death, and it's one of the strongest entities in the show. As you can probably tell, Megumi's main strength is his versatility. He has so many different tools he can use, and this makes him quite the threat, especially since some of these tools are extremely powerful on their own. Number 1 and 2 should not be a surprise to you. The second strongest student at a Jujutsu high school is Todo. Todo has 53,000 IQ. Do I need to say more? He also has an extremely versatile curse technique in Boogie Woogie, or rather he had one. Combining intense intellect with a versatile ability is a dangerous combination in general, but when it's combined with Toto's brawn as well, he becomes a real monster in combat and planning. He was instrumental in defeating Mahito and almost beat Hanami as well. On top of this, he's also an expert at using cursed weapons, as he was able to pick up and use Playful Cloud like it was nothing. The only real downside he has is that he can no longer use his curse technique and that he's missing a hand, but it's hard to say exactly how that will affect him from this point forward. I think it should be pretty clear why Todo is number 2 on this list, and it should be even more clear why Yuda is number 1. Yuda is undoubtedly the strongest sorcerer at a Jujutsu high school. Having access to the vengeful spirit Rika is enough to put him at number 1, but he is also just naturally talented with Jujutsu as well. He was able to beat Geto within his first year of enrollment, which is kinda crazy considering he was a special grade cursed user. On top of this, it's also been stated that he has an enormous amount of cursed energy, and he can also copy other cursed techniques. Like, this guy has so many powers and so much cursed energy that it's like he was meant to be overpowered. There's really no other student that comes close to him in terms of power. If Megumi mastered Mahoraga, then maybe they would be close, but no 10th shadow user has ever done that, so it seems unlikely. This list is obviously subjective. I tried to use as much reason and evidence as possible, but there will always be wiggle room in a power system like cursed energy. Let me know what your ranking is in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week. Oh yeah, please subscribe.